Hello, and welcome to our series of tutorial tapes on making drama work. Throughout the series, I'm going to be working with a teacher who's interested to try some drama in his school. His name is Ian Draper. Will you feel free to join us as if this is an open tutorial session, that you are actually in the room with us, and that whatever work we are setting up, you might want to consider how you might make drama work in your schools. Now, Ian, you've reached a point now where you want to try some drama, but I gather you're still nervous.
Very, very.
Yeah. Well, what's bothering you, and then we'll try and sort it.
Well, I've not really tried any drama before, and I've seen it working in a lot of classrooms, and I think the thing that worries me most is the organisation of the classroom. I can see that it could cause a lot of chaos in my classroom, and I don't know how to organise it so that the classroom is in order and functions well. I don't know what that means in terms of organising the children.
Yes.
In terms of groups.
Yes.
And obviously I'm very concerned that the drama should support the curriculum that
Of
I want
course,
to do.
yes, especially with the curriculum as it stands at the moment with teachers.
Yes.
Now, of course, we're discussing a primary classroom, aren't we?
Yes,
So, of course,
yes.
kids can look like they're running amok a bit.
Yes, yes indeed.
Yes.
So
Well, I think the first thing we're going to look at, I'm trying to get right down to basics so that you feel supported all the way through.
Right.
The first thing Ian is going to have to consider is how he uses sign in his classroom. Now, sign is the way children pick up what's going on round here. We all do it. As soon as we enter a space, we say, what signs can I read to tell me? Even simple things like, where can I go? You know in a supermarket where you can go and where you can't go. You know if there are plastic bags there, you can probably pick them up because they're public. We read sign all the time. Now, when we start to use drama systems, we deliberately harness this sense of sign so that the children begin to read it quite deliberately, not unconsciously, as they normally do. So that is the first thing we're going to have to think of. So when you think about your classroom, and you just, you know, you can make a sketch for me in a minute, but when you think about it, what signs will the children who come in every day tend to be looking out for? Now, an example might be, my students always know that my desk or this table or wherever I'm at is a sign that there'll be a chair to come in, sit down and let's get going on it. Now, there'll be all sorts of signs that you are subconsciously applying, territorial signs, you know, rights for them and rights for you and so on. Now, when you come on to use drama, you are going to shift this so that the signs you don't want to be relevant to the drama, you can't get rid of them. You can't start changing your architecture and so on. But you may begin to have to start changing the way the layout is. You have to start making things significant.
Right.
Significant. This means a conscious use of sign. And of course, at first, it might feel a bit artificial to you.
Yes.
And whenever we talk about drama now, I'll be taking for granted a bit, and you'll have to keep reminding me, that the signs that I assume you can do in your classroom, you may have to remind me, I don't think I can do that. You see, for a start, you're going to be looking very carefully about what you display, how you display it, and how they display it, and so on. Okay, so that's the first thing. We're into sign. Now, that means if you just do me a quick sketch of your classroom, I can get a sense of what to you is very important and what can't be shifted. You know, you can't change the colour of the curtains if you've got curtains, and so on. So will you begin to do that?
Yes.
Let's just see, like, have you got two doors or?
Well, it's an open classroom. If I draw it, it's roughly that with sort of an area at the back, like this.
Now, when the children come in, I mean, you can think about this as well, but when the children come in, what do you think, for them, is the first sign they look for?
I guess the thing that they see straight away will be the desks in the room.
Their own place.
Yes, yeah.
Is my place like I left it
Yes,
yesterday?
yes.
Right, okay,
And
so there's a
the
very
desks
important...
are all set out
Yes.
like this, I guess.
Now, that's to do with my territory, isn't it?
Yes.
And do you believe that the way you teach does make sure that they feel that is their territory? I mean, do you intrude on it, and when do you do that? That sort of thing. Now, I won't get you to answer all these at once because you're going to go away and think about this. But what's the second sign? It often used to be, where's Mrs. Heathcote?
Yes.
You know, if I were teaching, it tends to be, where's she this morning, sort of thing.
So
where are
the front
you?
of the room is here, and I don't have a desk in the room.
No. Do you have a territory?
I guess I have a territory which is around the front area of the room here, where the board and the front of the room is.
Well, now look, you need time to do this. You need time to go back to your classroom and say, what are the signs I've stopped noticing, but that the children may well be seeing? What are the things that I'm trying to make significant this week? Have you got any bulbs growing? You know,
Yes.
what is this week's significance?
Right.
Because often we can think that way to get down to the signs we've stopped noticing. You see, one of my signs is I always look very energetic. For me to look really laid back and quiet, I have to almost, you know, wear black and go into mourning.
Yeah.
Because I can't leave my body behind. Some teachers are very good at leading from the back.
Yes.
And you may be that sort, you see, but those are all part of the sign. Now then, I'm hammering you, but you're going to have to do something else now. And the same will apply to you. Every teacher, no matter what they think they are teaching about, are actually teaching a hidden curriculum. And this hidden curriculum I call their teaching drives, because this is what gives us our style as teachers. The things we can't leave behind no matter what is happening. Now, you will also have your drives, like every single teacher I ever met has. And frequently you can't dig them out because they're such second nature that you don't even realise. But when you come into using drama, you're going to have to watch these drives because something more of personality may be beginning to come into the way you teach. So, Ian, can you think of anything at all that you find, well, I never leave that behind, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, that would be part of how I teach?
I think that the thing that most occurs to me is when you were talking earlier about territory. It's an awareness of that, a respect for other people's territory, and an awareness of the boundaries that are around.
So if you had a drama situation where, for example, generals and troops were involved,
Yes.
territory would be one of the things you couldn't help but consider
Yes.
with the children. It would be one of almost your first questions.
It probably would,
Yes,
yes.
yes. And if it were in theatre, you'd tend to say, where will the general stand? But basically you're saying, what rights does the general have? So your territory is about rights and privileges,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now then, I'll have a look at my drives with you. Now some days, on a good day, I can get about 30 drives, which is a bit of a burden to carry about. You can't sort of make a list and say, that's it. I now know them all. Because constantly I find in teaching, I'm reviewing them. Now there's another element, and Ian will have to think about this. Every positive side of drive has a negative side. You see, I have a drive to punctuality. I have such a drive to punctuality, I catch the plane 2 hours before the one I went for. That is my obsession. I shall be ready with a shroud, you know, if I can, before I'm ready to cock me clogs. But the dark side of that is that one must not penalise other people for not being punctual. So in all my teaching, I remember if a student is late for a tutorial, there'll be a reason. So by knowing your positive drives, you get a large control over your negative, the darker side of those drives. Now there's a certain language, Ian, for thinking about these drives. So if I can just show you, I've written mine out because it just gives a sense of the language, that's all. Now I'm not suggesting that your drives have to look either as many. If you get 2, it's enough for a start. You start with what you can. Now you see, where you are is worth being is one of the things that influences my teaching. I'm happy to start where you're at. I don't necessarily want you to be somewhere. I'd rather you were before we get going. So wherever Ian is at in his thinking about work in drama, to me is a very, very good platform. Now it took me a long time to reduce it to where you are is worth being, because it's a kind of active way of writing it. It's to do with interaction. Now another one is, it took me a very long time to get this one, I am obsessed with form. See, I've got this amazing, well, it's not amazing, I mean, it's just ordinary really. I'm interested in how anything looks. Its shape, its texture, its size and so on. If I'm not careful, I push this at children. The dark side of that is constantly interrupting them to say, have you noticed this? Look at the colour of that butterfly. Your eyes are blue, you know, and so on and so on. And I also like in this that everything's always in process of becoming or changing. You see, I look at my hands that are ageing. This to me is not at all a negative thing. It's this sense of how used are they. If my knuckles are swollen today, it's because I did a lot of sewing yesterday, and so on. And so we go on. I believe very strongly I must help children realise knowledge. So knowing what you know, to me, is a big drive. And if I'm not careful, I get boring. And I have to be careful, and so on. I strongly believe, for example, that books read you. You might think you're reading books, but actually, in summoning the images to read the book, they are reading you. So, of course, all the time I'm looking at the forms of books and so on. So, here are my drives. I have a strong sense of service. I don't mind being a dog's body in the classroom. That means, you see, that sometimes I help too much. But never ever, that's right, and never ever will I get to the point of saying, well, why should I do it? You should be doing this. I could do that in the drama, but I couldn't do it in the real world of the classroom. In the drama world, if I were in a role, I might say, generals do not carry their own guns. But I can't say that in teachers don't carry chairs for children. I couldn't do it like that. So this is the second thing I'm going to be asking you to do. Because you see, the flavour of your teaching, and to be safe, we've got to see where you mustn't be pressed too hard. You see, your drives help you to see what risks you will take and what you can't take. And this gives you a lot of security, especially if you worry about things like the noise and the fact that the classroom might look like mayhem when it's usually a fairly orderly thing. Now, don't put anything vague down in these drives. I mean, you bring what you've time to do. But if you think, you know, I love children, I mean, that I'm not going to be pleased with it. It's just not going to be any use to us. I don't care whether you love them or not. It's how you function with them. And you see, when you start to invite children to participate in drama, you are inviting the real behaviour of the children as individuals. You are suddenly, with as much discretion as you can, of course, and as much care to save everybody from muddle, you are going to be inviting people to drop those classroom ways of behaving that don't happen anywhere else in the world. You're going to be looking at your teacher talk, and some of that will have to go, because nobody talks like teachers do anywhere else in the world except in school. And you are suggesting to children, collaborate, make the spaces between you filled with communication. Now, you see, this does cause children quite some problems, because suddenly it looks like an invitation to do what they please. And that is something you don't want to go wrong for you. So the social health of your class is one of the most, the things you'll have to pay the most careful attention to. Usually the real social health is the way they talk to one another when you're not around. Right. And there's, to a certain extent, the feeling of, I'll put on my classroom behaviour a bit. Now, I'm not suggesting your class is like that. In fact, the awkward children in a class are the ones who don't put on classroom behaviours. They behave like they are, and frequently won't put on the classroom behaviour that is expected of children. Putting it at its worst, is expected of children. And you see, you're deliberately going to be probing into, how do you people think? How do you get on with each other? What do you think about me being part of this drama? Can we be really honest and caring gradually about how we get on together? Now, Doris Lessing has written about this in her book Shikasta. And what she calls it is the substance of we feeling. Drama is not about, I'm doing my bit, you're doing your bit. Drama is about the substance of we, the interactiveness in social groups about matters of concern. That's what drama is about. What we are currently concerned to resolve between us. And this is frequently something children haven't had to work in, especially, how many have you got in your class?
25.
Well, you see, 25 children, and how old are they?
Well, they're about 10, 9.
10, and there'll be mixed ability and possibly mixed racially, are they?
Yes, they are.
Well, you see, you're inviting an awful lot of new considerations, both for yourself and for the children. To get on with 24 other people is quite difficult in an enterprise, a social enterprise. Now, I think, to a very great extent, when you begin to work in drama then, the way children expect to be treated is one of the areas you have to look at as well. So we've got the signs in your classroom, we've got the drives you yourself are bringing into that intercourse with the children, and we've got the third thing, which is the children's expectation of the teacher and the teacher's expectation of the children. Now, I call these paradigms. What paradigm operates in a school? And I shall be asking Ian in a minute to consider which might be the most dominant. They're never very simple and clear-cut. There isn't just one. Which paradigms are likely to be operating in his school, which tells children what their power is within the working time? Now, you see, I've written these out, and there may be more paradigms than these. I mean, I just think for myself, as you might say. You see, if you think of the child, let's see what this one is. Here's a paradigm which we've made pictorial. Do you operate in your classroom, or does your school mainly operate on this paradigm of the child as clay? We will mould the children to the way we like them to be. We'll give them the knowledge and form it with them in the way we think knowledge is. Now, you see, if you look round your school first and then your classroom, you can actually see in your behaviour and you can see in their behaviour. Are they waiting to be moulded? You four get into a group.
Yes.
And this is what you have to do, and I'll come round in a minute and help you do it. You know, there's nothing to do with being adversarial. You genuinely want them to do it like best, what you think is best for them.
Yeah.
Like, no, don't go in that group, Jimmy, go in this group, Jimmy, because I've got an idea of how groups ought to be. I'm moulding it. Later on, you see, it becomes, no, this is the history we're teaching. This is our model.
Right.
I don't want you to question it at the moment because there isn't time, or whatever it might be.
Right.
Now, you see, another paradigm is the child as machine. I mean, we've got a treadmill here, but I used to sit a lot in staff rooms waiting because I was always a guest in the school, and I always appreciated that children would lend me their classes to kind of practice on. And frequently it bothered me that one often heard this machine element discussed. Well, by March they should all be able to do their 10 times table, and there's just the feeling that, and they better had. And one is in a terrible dilemma of, I've got to try and get my results.
Yes.
And so I'll have to kind of make them toe the line enough, even though we may be very, very sympathetic, but we're still treating them as machines. In the way that in the Victorian mills, the people were meant to fit the machines. The loom went at a certain pace, and the weaver had to weave at the pace of the loom, and so on. This one, I think, is a very sad one, and I don't know the point at which a person begins to be like this. It's when the child begins to be seen as adversary. And so there's a sort of quiet war going on all the time between, I'll lick you into shape because I'm bigger than you, I'll never beat you, I won't do anything like that. But I'm terribly sorry, but, you know, I've got my eye on you. And one does hear this in terms of class 4, don't say you've got class 4. And I've never quite fathomed out what it is that makes a teacher who starts wanting to understand children, wanting to work with them, wanting to go with the grain of them, where that turning point slowly comes in where, you know, well, I'm getting a bit fed up and these kids are better, whatever it might be, because it creeps, doesn't it? It's like ivy killing a tree. Now, this is my favourite paradigm, but don't feel you have to be this one. This is my aspiration paradigm. I believe that what children know has to be constantly stirred by what I'm doing with them. You see, where you are is worth being as a start. There's one of my drives. So I'm not trying to fill them up. I'm trying to stir their knowledge. So most of my work begins with, what kind of strategy can I use to find out what they already think they know? I don't mind wrongness or rightness, but I do need to know where they're at. I want to know if there's an interest. I want to know if there's a lot of misinformation, because frequently there is. But also I want to know the way of their knowing it. So I call this the child as crucible. And of course, I aspire to it. You know, in my dreams, that's the way I am. I don't always manage it. And sometimes time catches us up. And so instead of just stirring it and helping them realise the new colour, the new design, the new whatever knowledge we've got, sometimes I just pour it in. But the main thing is, because I know I have a drive to that, I can watch the negative and I don't feel I couldn't forgive myself occasionally for not doing it well, because we're only human. This one, I always feel is a bit nonsensical to do it this way. I'll fill you up. Now, yesterday we did the Great Lakes, and tomorrow we're going to do the crops. Right. You know, and then after that, and it's terribly logical, the Great Lakes naturally goes on to crops, because it's, in my mind, they're all Canada. and so on and so on. And this one, I fear, frequently, children's expectation, parents' expectation, tradition tends to make us feel, well, if you keep on filling them up, children as vessels are bound in the long run to have more in them than they had when they started. My problem is I have an awful feeling it sort of leaks out down the side here. And what I was filled up with at school, most of it tends to have disappeared.
Yeah.
And it's a shame, really, though I do remember the Great Lakes. There must have been some good filling teacher taught me the Great Lakes. This one, I think, is a dangerous paradigm. You be my friend, and I'll be yours.
Mm.
And this friendship will be based on, I genuinely want to help you. However, there are certain parameters. It's very hard, especially in drama, when somebody says, there isn't a horse there, I don't believe there's a horse there, and one is saying, well, actually, you could make a horse in your mind if you try along with me.
Right.
But this way says, okay, if you don't want there to be a horse, you better sit out until there is one. This one, I think, we often use when we genuinely care. I'll light you up. My enthusiasm will light you up. And I will never get tired of my enthusiasm because I do care. The fact that I'm lighting you up might also be burning you down.
Yes.
So you've got to watch this. You know, I don't want children to wait for me to light them up. But it's very hard sometimes to convince them that the way they would light themselves up will suit me. You know, where you are is worth being, and so on. This one, I laugh at a bit, and I listen for it, you know, well, given enough time and the right atmosphere, they'll grow. They'll come to it in their time. Now, you see, I don't think I'm paid to stand around a well-fed adult, bigger than them, slowly aging. I don't think I'm paid to just let them throw their own ignorance round. I think I'm paid to intervene in the most positive way I can find, which, of course, in my ideal is the crucible. It sounds awful when you put it like that, you know, throwing their own ignorance around. It's this constant watching to see when I can now move this knowledge, move this understanding, and the strategies of how. Now, of course, when you start using drama, you multiply your strategies. You start squaring them, the potential strategies you have. And the last paradigm I'm thinking of here is the, I've got it here, where is it? It's the child as echo. No, don't do it like that. Do it like this. When I was very small, I can remember in my infant school, Miss Bray always said, fold the paper and make the corners kiss. Now, I've never forgotten it, because it went on for about 3 years, because we had a very little infant school with a lot of, you know, various ages. And I remember Miss Bray never ever let you do anything your way. And this business of, I don't want you to make a mistake, so I'm going to help you never ever make a mistake by venturing forward, you see. So this one really does bother me, and I listen for it, of course. Now, I don't expect you to be able to spot one paradigm that your whole school operates on, obviously. I used to listen in staff rooms. The notices that are pinned up tell you a bit about it. No parent beyond this point. I mean, I hope there aren't many of these around, but occasionally you still do find them. I used to collar a child, when of course as a visitor I could do this, you see, and be just a bit helpless to just see the kinds of initiatives that they would take. the silent pointing one that like a wraith guides you forward, but speaks not. But you can't say the whole school will be like this. They're not afraid of you, but they are not going to interrupt what they're doing because they may not have to, you know.
Yes.
Or there is no need to speak, you know, everybody has to go that way here. The kinds of ways children initiate conversations with teachers, these can be part of it. The way they stop you in corridors. Have they got a bold eye? Do they hurry past with that sort of behaviour that says there isn't a teacher there? And the same applies often when I've walked into a school I haven't been known, and I could have been a parent, and the way teachers don't see me. You know, this can happen occasionally. So I'm not asking you to go in your school and make judgments. I'm just asking you to make observations. Listen to yourself talking to the children. You, under certain circumstances of stress, you may move into a more negative paradigm than if you were dealing with the same situation with less stress, you see. And that is going to take a little while, because first you've got the tone of the school, and often the tone of the culture from which the children come. I mean, if the paradigm is children are seen and not heard in the main, and when they are heard, they're answering something I've asked them,
Yes.
you know. And the tone of my question is what will guide me to the paradigm. You see, oh, have you managed to do it? Might be a crucible question.
Yes.
And have you managed to do it? Is an adversary question. Because it's always in the demeanour. And children have the world worked out because they have to. So the kind of way I operate the paradigm creates the response.
Right.
And so listen to yourself very carefully. Do not be depressed. Do not be depressed. Because where you are is worth being, and you can shift. If it matters, you can shift, you see. Now then, there's something else we ought to look at. I'm trying to push it all at you, even though I don't expect you to know it all at the beginning.
Right.
When you start working in drama, you've got three kinds of levels. And because we're dealing with smaller children, these are probably the levels from which you'll find your material. How people get on together, the kinds of problems people have to solve together, whether they're at the mighty epic stuff of, you know, Baal and, you know, the whole business of Naboth's well. I mean, it might be done at a big biblical level, but basically it's a sociological one, which is to do with how are we going to deal with Elijah and our God when this new woman has brought this other god in called Baal. That's a sociological problem. And between them, the great mighty matters will have to be resolved. If you work the same situation at this level, though, you're not saying, this is Jezebel, Baal, and Elijah. You're saying, why is it people have to argue about faith? So you see, at that level, you've removed it from Elijah and Baal and so on, and you've said, what we're looking for is a situation that gets the children to consider this. So you invent. It can be in any period, it can be any circumstance. It might be another god, but it needn't be another god, and so on. So you get rid of the storyline. And some teachers get a bit bogged down in storylines. So later on, we'll be thinking how to help you find your material. This area is probably not going to concern you a little bit, or a lot anyway, because at this age, you're not being saying to children, dig deep into the kind of personality, the psyche of that person, but let's look at the attitude of that person. The psyche of the person is when an actor or some older students are saying, this is what makes that person tick, and all that happens is a result of that. If you can move it to this, you've got your big group. You've got all your attitudes for exploration rather than the personality for exploration. Now this brings something else in when you start looking at material. Now I understand you want a science basis for your drama. You want to try to use drama to help with your science program, which you'll have to tell me about.
Right.
Right. It's probably much more likely to be in this area of attitudes towards things, trying to understand something because we have this kind of responsibility. Now, if you keep those three in mind, and you look at perhaps dramas going on in your school, I don't know. If it is, just if you can, walk through or talk to a teacher about what they're doing. Just see if they realise which level they're hitting. Because you've got 24 or 25 children. So this and this are likely to be how you handle it. Because 25 children all psychologically behaving differently is going to be very difficult both for you to handle and for them to cope with. Also, you've got to be careful. You have no right to probe into the personal lives of the children, so they are trapped into disclosing matters that are not your business. These two help this. So that we deal with the problem, we don't deal with the person, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And so you see, I mean, if you had a situation where you were looking at good neighbours, and you deal with it this way, you get into different personalities, obviously. The neighbour at number 35 is a horrible woman who does this, this and this. But if you look at it at this level, it's what is there in our street that we all need to look after or value or get access to, and how are we going to solve this problem? That, you know, the workmen have left all these wooden planks and the kids can't play and this is a problem. We're not going to be dealing with that particular workman. We're dealing with us finding ways round to cooperate on resolving it and getting out of the particular mess we might find ourselves in.
And an anthropological view of that would be?
An anthropological view would probably be to do with territory and space and rights. I tend to say, why is it that we need to cooperate? What is it that makes it useful? And what stops cooperation? What is it that stops people not able to cooperate? So I don't say things like that to the children, but when I'm looking for my material, you see, this makes me free of a period, a special incident and so on. I'll invent a special incident to suit what I want to teach, of course. You can't do drama without it being a special incident, but that will come on to later when you've done your sort of homework. Now, there's one other thing Ian will have to consider. When he begins to work with children, no matter whether he's working in drama or not, there's the matter of the person who does things, but there's also the spectator in the head. What is the child thinking about, noticing when they are actually doing whatever it is that a teacher wants them to do? Now, in drama, the teacher is trying to, first of all, and this is what gives Ian so many strategies that he can use when he's thought about them, of course. They don't come by magic. The first thing he's going to have to do is to kind of protect the class into some kind of success. So they feel, oh, that was really interesting. We managed a bit. And you might manage for 5 minutes and then leave it before it flops apart, you see. But the teacher is protecting, is trying to engage the class altogether, and so he needs some signs that will help them be engaged, and there are all sorts of things you can do there. Then he's gradually going to want them to be energized. They must start to find the sort of energy and a bit of concern about what they're doing. You can't carry everything. So first you're protecting them, and then you're trying to get them to bring the energy rather than you. And all the time you're trying to make the self-spectator in the children see what it is they're trying to do in the drama, but how what they are really doing as themselves is affecting the drama. So awakening the self-spectator is going to be one of the things you'll be engaged on in drama. What do we think about it now we've tried it? Just wondering what sort of a person we want here is a self-spectating question. Of course, I don't know whether goats eat straw or whatever it might be. Is another, can I just think about this? So people tend to think drama is doing, you know, get them on their feet, dash them all around, and that'll be it. And then that's a bit of a problem at the end, but I'll sort it out. I'll say, right, back to your desks. But it isn't like that. It's this very, very slow building from the spectator that says, I feel a bit silly doing this. And the older the children are, the sillier they may feel, so they need more protection. To gradually, I can look at it without imposing my own feelings about silliness. I no longer feel it's silly to do it. Because you're only asking a little shift at a time in the self-spectator. Does that make a bit of sense? Or
yes,
not?
I can see what you're talking about.
So when you go back to teaching this week, you can hear when you feel you're awakening the self-spectator. And of course, if you awaken it punitively, it comes out things, and do you think that's good enough? At its worst, you know. But the self-spectator that is positive might be, look, we've made a start. I never thought of drawing it like that. Look how we've done it. Or it might be, what would you say you've noticed about me as a teacher? Because you've not met me before. You can't say that because you've been teaching them a term. Yes. But I might say, what have you noticed about me? And then the self-spectator question. Shall I tell you what I've noticed about you? And then it has to be fed positively, very positively, in terms that make them check on it. Well, I'll tell you what I've noticed, that most of you don't mind looking me straight in the eye. Did you know you looked straight in the eyes of people? That's really nice for teachers. That's a self-spectator question. Now, you see, in the drama, you wouldn't be speaking in that direct way to the child. You might be speaking within the drama. Of course, we don't know whether Jezebel will be able to face the people. See, I'm just wondering whether the Jezebels of this world hide behind, you know, guards and veils and things. I'm not sure whether she'd be able to face the people, not whether you'd be able to face the people. Because we're talking about she at the moment, not any particular child. Does that help a little bit? Now later we can go into this. Yes. But it does mean as the children get more experience and as you get more experience, more and more you are handing the power over to them. First of all, the power to protect you keep until they can protect themselves. You never stop protecting them from bringing private matters to the public arena. That is not on. And it's quite terrible sometimes when you do hear teachers in drama inviting private business, not because they mean to, they hardly ever mean to, but because the form of language lures the children into crossing out of the drama into their own circumstances. and so on. But gradually, you see, you're trying to empower them to bring more and more of their ideas, and they can only do that when the self-spectator feels less and less concerned with self. Strangely enough, the self-spectator can start not bothering about how I think about it, but how this affects what we're doing. So we can do this now. I think we can do this. So the child is spectating how the thing's developing now, not how they feel about it. Does that help a little bit?
More involved in it through that process.
Yes, but you never stop protecting. Some children need a lot of protection. I mean, I've worked with classes where there's been a scapegoat. You have to protect that scapegoat from being scapegoated in the drama. In fact, sometimes it's through the drama I spot there's a scapegoat. So I will protect that scapegoat, not just for her sake, or his, but so they can lay off the scapegoating. So I'm protecting them from having to do it and fall into the old pattern, and I'm protecting the child from suffering it in the social event, because I've invited it in the social event, you see. So now, let's sum up what you have to do for your next, I'm just going to check through. You're first of all going to look at your drives, the things you teach, no matter what you think you're teaching. Now, I think this is the key to sanity as a teacher, because it allows you to say, well, I'm a bit in control of the situation. I can summon things to my help, and I can see what made me do that. And I can get off this business of feeling, as it's so easy in teaching to do it, to feel like you're no good. You know, I call this the black dog that jumps on your shoulders, and you have to say, you know, get off. Because quite suddenly, one is apparently going on fine, and suddenly one feels, I don't know what to do next. I haven't got an idea in my head. How am I supposed to be standing up here teaching people? Yeah. Now, I may be wrong in this. I just believe it has been enormously useful to me, and I continue to live my life this way, because I don't have to leave myself at home when I go to school. My drives at home are just the same as my drives in the classroom. I mean, what else could they be? Yes. Even though in the classroom, of course, they are filtered differently, because one has certain responsibilities in the classroom that are different than the responsibilities of one's home, and so on. The second thing is you're going to have a look at what sorts of paradigms seem to be operating, because you see, especially if you haven't done it before, if you go into a classroom where children expect to be taught like vessels, and you start using drama to get them off it, because in drama we're all going to be thinking about how to sort this out, not I'm telling you, your drama may fail, and you may feel, well, I can't, I'm hopeless. You're not hopeless, it's just you're going against the operant paradigm. And with young teachers, I feel this is most important. You can't expect to turn children's attitude round to teachers in a 3-week teaching practice, for goodness sake. And you can't expect it, because suddenly they're going to have to see you as just a slightly different negative of yourself, you know, a different view. It's showing bits at the edges we didn't perhaps ever see quite before. And some of it you feel a bit self-conscious about. You know, because you may say, oh, I'm hearing myself say things because I'm paying some attention now and it sounds awful. So you might go through a stage of feeling even worse a teacher, you know, than...
Oh, thank you.
Fine. But I am serious about the fact that if they expect to be used as echoes, and you start saying, well, can you decide? Shall we decide this? They will be utterly bewildered, because they're saying, well, we're waiting. Where are the pens? You haven't handed them out, you know. And this is what teachers often do in September. They lick them into shape. In the best sense of the word, I don't mean that negatively, that they'll have to get used to the operant paradigm here. They may not think of it in those terms, but I don't get your pens for you. They're over there and they better be put back there, you know, is one of the examples of a teacher changing perhaps what they've been used to. And the other thing you're going to look at is how sign shows up in your classroom. If I were a visitor in your room, is a good question to ask yourself. What would you most want me to notice? And how would I know that you'd like me to notice it? You see, if I'm a visitor in a school, I can always tell if it's the teacher that's displayed the stuff than if the children have. And I'm not saying it should be one or the other. It's not for me to judge, because there are times when I will take great care over the display because we need that sign. Sometimes I might display it in a very unusual way because I want them to see it when they come in. I've spent my time cleaning an area, and I don't mean polishing it and I don't mean emptying it. I mean cleaning it so that something is significant. And it might be my tone of voice that eventually makes it significant. It needn't be a thing. It can be an empty table and my hands on it, because I've decided this focus will get us begun, you see. So you've got your homework fixed.
Yes.
Right. Thank you. Now you do your homework and we'll meet again, I hope.